Hi, I'm Gregory Gundelfinger, the CEO of Telna, a managed global cellular infrastructure provider for mobile network operators and connectivity service providers. We have the largest LTE and LTE-M footprint in the world, and today we're kicking off our new series which will be bringing together thought leaders in the telecom industry and technology. In our own business, we have always embraced leading-edge technologies. When we entered telecoms, you needed to get a physical SIM card into every device in order to deliver cellular connectivity. If you wanted to switch networks or the SIM card, it was a huge logistical nightmare. For that reason, we pioneered the programmable SIM card and multi-IMSI technology, which is now mainstream. With the standardization of the eSIM, you can now provision a new SIM card remotely, which has completely changed our landscape. We are seeing companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon leading the development of AI technology and making it accessible. But we also see them making bold acquisitions of telecom technology. For example, Microsoft's acquisition of Affirmed, which provides virtual evolved packet cores, and Metaswitch, which delivers voice and data solutions to mobile network operators. You also can't ignore mobile network operators like Rakuten and Mobile, Dish and Reliance Jio, that are all starting to look more like technology companies with a considerable effort to become vertically integrated. The question is now, who are the market makers in the world? Will it be big tech or these new age MNOs? I personally believe that we're on the verge of a new ecosystem which has the focus on operational leverage and technology. Today we'll be discussing AI and telecoms, and that will shed some light on this new topic. Let's dive straight in. Tonight we have Norm Judah, former CTO of Worldwide Services, and Microsoft Romil Bahl, who is the CEO of Core. Norm Judah, former CTO of Worldwide Services at Microsoft, is a keynote speaker and advisor for strategy and leadership. With more than 40 years of experience in the industry, Norm has created a name as a sought-after thought leadership, particularly in AI. Romil Bahl serves as CEO of Core. He brings almost 30 years of consulting, information technology, professional services, and IoT experience in high growth and turnaround environments. Let's dive straight in. Norm, let's start off with you. How do you define AI to a business executive?
I actually think, Greg, that the way you pose that question is actually the right way of asking it, which is the business executive, because most people today believe that AI is a techie thing, guys in the back room playing with machine learning, trying to understand what it is, but no real business engagement. And so one of the real keys is for the business leaders really trying to understand AI, what it is, and how it can change their business and the way they communicate with their whole value chain, their suppliers and to their customers. You can't afford to not be in AI today, because there will be people who are actually going to do dramatic things in the marketplace today. We'll get to some of the details about the opportunity, but you frame it both at a technology level and then also at the sort of balance sheet level as well.
What are the practical steps that you see for small, medium, and large companies that we can take, that Romil and I can take today with some tangible results for us to be able to take advantage of what's available today?
There is a core competency in the industry today around system thinking and modeling, and AI is exactly the same kind of thing, but taken to the next step. What it does is actually puts a burden on people to understand models and systems and outcomes and algorithms, and the language is going to go that way dramatically. So it's going to require that business owners and business leaders actually start to have a deeper understanding of these systems and these modeling. The simple way to start, it actually is really simple, is you've got to commit, put together a small team, and experiment and do it. And that little experimentation team, maybe it's 4 or 5 people, maybe the first step is to build a simple bot for customer service. I mean, everybody's doing that today. The same as people built websites 15 years ago. Let's build a bot today. But what that does is actually starts to get you familiar with the kinds of technologies, what can happen. But what's key to doing that is actually having a business leader propose a hypothesis which says something to the effect of, if we can actually see the following patterns, then the following actions can happen. So it's a hypothesis with an outcome. run an experiment. Maybe it's 4 weeks, maybe it's 6 weeks, maybe it's 8 weeks. In order to do that, to actually understand it, and then have an exit strategy at the end. So it's hypothesis, execution, and exit. And that's going to take participation from the business leaders, participation from the techie guys, possibly sales and marketing who are involved. And really, you need to pull it out of the technical organization. It's great that they're doing the work trying to identify the best machine learning algorithm. Actually, doesn't matter which one you use in the end. But the idea is to actually experiment and go with it and move in a very, very agile way. Within the networks that we're talking about today, the AI really happens in three places. It happens at the edge where there's some pattern recognition going on at the edge, trying to make decisions in real time. It happens in the network, which is many of the things that you're doing today around network optimization, customer service, failure, resiliency, and so on. But then it also happens in the core as the big business problem. And you can actually start in any one of those three locations, but start with something easy, start with something simple, and kind of move from there.
Romil, do you have any input to some of the suggestions that Norm has spoken about?
I'll start by saying a lot of what Norm said resonates with me very well. I'm a business person myself, and so I tend to try to simplify. And it's like, hey, what should you do now, or what should you do if this likely action happens? And so if you sort of keep that simplistically in your mind, and all ML is it's automated improvements to a process based on algorithms, and all AI is it's the ability for a computer to perform tasks that normally would require sort of some human intelligence, right? And so we apply these techniques consistently. We apply them across the three types of data core that we think about: sort of sensor data, the actual payload data that you do IoT for, but increasingly metadata, and then the usage data that, of course, is critical to our business. And at the end of the day, on the how should you adopt it, I'll say keep it simple. The loop is the same, guys. It's here's my goals, right? I need to get visibility of what's happening around, improve my business, improve my decision making, right? With the improved insights, identify opportunities, got to go do something, perform some actions. What happened from that? What outcomes came out? Go right back to establish those goals again and do that loop again and again, and just start to use analytics to get you better. That would be my contribution.
But some of the speculative technologies that are going to be AI driven, like autonomous cars and virtual reality, for next generation networks. So I mean, these types of applications are going to really drive the requirement for capacity, data with lower latency.
Greg, these applications definitely represent right what you're talking about: autonomous cars, virtual reality, drones. These represent that next set of demands for networks and for all of us. In terms of how we think about it, look, I mean, I don't think it's a one or the other sort of conversation, right? I mean, to me, what's exciting about all of this is that innovation happens when these technologies converge, right?
Correct.
When we could suddenly get GPS precise, a smartphone with the power that only LTE gave us, with the first generation of LTE being 4G, right? And the bandwidth and latency. Now suddenly you could create Uber. It wasn't possible before that, or Snapchat, or pick your favorite example, right?
So let me jump in here, because I think it's the question of who's going to be the player or players. You have to sort of get to a taxonomy, a breakdown, which Romil sort of alluded to a little bit about these structures, which was the compute cloud as really extended from the core all the way to the edge. And the edge, you've got little computes, and the core, you've got this big compute. But there's also then the data cloud and the AI cloud. So when you start to break this apart and have a look at a layering problem, this is like back to the old 7 layers. This is a different set of layers. There's probably 7 because it's a round number. The application really has to be written in such a way that it's in what I'll call a mostly connected environment. In other words, it's always connected at high speed, low latency until it isn't. And there's a period of time when you actually lose connectivity at the edge. And how autonomous do you want the edge to be? I think that there's going to be an opportunity for somebody to provide that level of application capability that really looks at it in a broad way. And that might be some of the big guys partnering with others around them. It might be somebody who provides the integration all over. The analogy in the compute sense would have been what SAP did. which is they built this complete end-to-end business management system
Yeah.
that wasn't necessarily the best of everything, but its integration was wonderful, particularly at the data schema level. And so I think you will see different players, you will see different partnerships that occur
Yeah.
around each one of those layers and the integration and operationalization of those layers.
Yeah, I agree. Amazon, Microsoft, they have an interest in you connecting to their server infrastructure to utilize these applications.
When you actually look at the big cloud guys you talked about, their business is consumption. They actually want you to consume compute resources. They want you to consume storage in the cloud. That's how they make money.
Yeah.
And then they want to do everything to make it as frictionless as possible for you to consume those things. Are there players who are actually going to jump into that AI as a platform business? And who do they partner with? Do they do it themselves or do they partner? And the cost of entry into that platform business is going to be very high. And there's only going to be a certain set of companies that are going to be able to do that, that have the financial wherewithal to do it, let alone the courage to do it. And so I think that the possibilities are going to start shrinking of who can.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's a global problem. It's not just a Western problem. It's a global problem.
So can every mobile network integrate with every single OEM or enterprise customer to ensure that that these very, very ambitious performance KPIs are met? There is really the opportunity for virtualization of the core network and how you integrate and bridge the gap between enterprise mobile network and these large public clouds.
But that does change the nature of the relationships or the partnerships that exist, because there's really sort of three strategies of partnership. One is we're just going to exploit one another, do some stuff together, and it works fine. The number of partnerships that you can execute on is limited because you can't take risks with everybody. So you are going to pick and choose who you're going to partner with at a very deep level and who you're going to partner with at an exploitation level. Sure, we'll do work with you, but if you fail, that's okay. How do you actually look at those relationships? And you cannot have many of those, and those decisions of who you partner with are going to become very strategic.
Romil, I mean, have you got any examples of success stories where you've been utilized by a mobile network operator or an enterprise to be able to achieve these aggressive performance KPIs?
Yeah, so let me actually hit this this discussion here at a couple of different levels, right? So the first thing I'll just say is, I mean, sort of look at who core is. The normal, carrier has a boundary at the border of the country they're in, right? And yeah, they can have roaming arrangements and that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, the service that core provides is sort of a global independent leader of making connectivity happen and this convergence. And by the way, could be low range use cases, right? Some of our largest customers are in the connected health space, which is about a third of our business now. And right, my father's pacemaker has to talk Bluetooth to the hub, and then there's got to be some backhaul, preferably cellular, because you really don't want to be Wi-Fi dependent. It's out with power, and now there's nobody monitoring his heart. Sorry, not acceptable, and on and on and on for mission critical use cases. But that complexity, that handling of the devices, all of the managed services, everything that you need to make it work out there, connectivity management, data management, device management, the bread and butter, what we've done for over 2 decades. That is hugely relevant and hugely important for these big guys that you're talking about, right? Because without us, none of the rest of that happens. I actually like this notion of few partnerships and take risks, because that's how we actually execute. Several of these sort of the big 6 names that you've mentioned are indeed where we have taken those partnership steps. We're driving in conjunction, in fact, with SIM manufacturing type players, security and EOS, if you will, for the eSIM, EUICC, Savvy, right? So taking that device to cloud with the secure element, using, in fact, the standards by the GSMA, right, that have come out in terms of security, SAFE, for those of you that know what that is. Those are absolute bets we're taking because, this is real. It's coming. There's 75 billion IoT devices going to be out there by 2030. This decade of IoT that I talk about, 2021 to 2030, is happening, whether we're ready for it or not. And by the way, that does not count the smartphones and other consumer devices, add another
100%.
15, 16
Yeah.
billion, right? You got 9 or 10 devices per human being on the planet by 2030, and massive opportunity for us to connect and make all of that real.
So I think that, that there's going to be a demand not just on the network coming from consumers, but I think there's going to be a huge demand coming from IoT. And I think that we always focus on IoT in the context of 5G, but I think that the demands of the consumer are going to be dramatically increased as well.
Let me just stick with that consumer thing for a second on IoT, because I do think that the world will be fragmented. There'll be industrial, commercial IoT that is well looked after. Consumer IoT will just grow and blossom like crazy with doorbells and all sorts of other crazy things. But those consumer devices are incredibly fragile. I'll give you a simple example. I have a house. I've got some cameras and some stuff around my house. And I just upgraded my network, my Wi-Fi network at my house to Wi-Fi 6. I put in new routers. I put a mesh network in. It's incredibly fast. And none of my IoT devices worked, because with Wi-Fi 6, the router was not backward compatible. And the concept of the consumer business is, well, just throw your doorbell away and go buy another one. There is no upgradability. There's no supportability. You're kind of on your own. And so I worry about that mentality leaking into the sort of commercial space as well, where there's some farmer in the middle of Australia, who's got this agri-tech stuff, and suddenly, it's it's not working, and who's going to look after it? And so I worry about the fragility at the end of the componentry, the connectivity, the end-to-end provisioning, management, etc. And there's work to be done, I think, in the industry about trying to sort of retain that. And 5G will be stable and it'll be around for a long time, but it's not so much about the physical transport. Is it around the sort of end-to-end scenario that starts to become very fragile?
No, well, I think you bring up some interesting problems that the telecom industry has been dealing with for a long time. The sunsetting of 2G has been a huge problem, and now 3G, because of all these devices that were deployed in the wild that had that exact problem. So I think that sunsetting of technologies is going to continue to become a problem, something that we'll continue to deal with. I think eSIM has limited the impact because some networks have sunsetted. Maybe Romil, you could. I saw you were smiling. Maybe you could add to that.
Let me say a couple of things first. So I didn't grow up a telco guy. So I get to Core 3-ish years ago, and I start to ask all the dumb questions, right? I go, what do you mean like our customers have to put all these Lego bricks together themselves? And I mean, I'm in some of my larger customers' offices. Anybody who would see me, my first 100 days, my second 100 days, and I just asked them, what do you think of connectivity? What are your problems? What keeps you awake at night? And it astounded me that within 5 minutes, business leaders, CEOs, COOs of their businesses would start to relay stories of how, 7 years ago, this antenna wouldn't work with this module, and then I had to put this together with this, but that was banned that. And I just went, oh my God, why is that stuff even in your brain? Because I just want your brain focused on your customer, your end value proposition, your growth, for God's sake. So we crafted our strategy at Core, at what we call now Core 3.0, this sort of next era, around this very simple premise, which Norm you're talking about, and I sort of call it, well, first of all, we go across connectivity solutions and analytics with a ton of managed services because I want to do all of this and make it really easy for you. But inside a connectivity, which is the part we're talking about here, we talk about connectivity out of the box and for the lifetime of the device. And this should not be that big a problem, right? But the trauma of 2G and 3G sunsets that we're dealing with and our customers are dealing with, has been terrible. Now, enough said on that. Let me talk about reasons for optimism, right? We think GSMA is getting smarter in how it's thinking about it. We think the standard setting bodies, the 3GPPs, the MNOs are starting to work together better. There is a notion of orchestration of networks and, if you will, this network of networks. So 5G isn't really 5G. It's 5G, to Greg's point, broadband, where you need really high speeds. You need to make your augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality apps work. There's the massive IoT, if you will, the sensor-oriented, low-power, wide area, next generation massive IoT. And then there's the ultra-reliable, right? So the ultra-low latency if I'm doing robotic surgery in the eye or any part of the body for that matter, I don't need any problems. And so I think the world will start to settle down. There will be more of a focus of backward compatibility. I suspect the transition from 4G to 5G will be a lot less problematic. There will be problems, but I hope also that it'll continue to get better, and 5G to 6G. And this notion of long-term evolution will really end up being that. It's a long-term evolution as opposed to trauma and heartache and get all my devices out and change everything because the tech decided to sunset.
Actually, Greg, Romil brought up something really interesting there, which was that you started to talk about the overall sort of taxonomy and then went down to the connectivity part. I want to go back up again to the application side, which is, again, as an architect, I worry about the application. I'm trying to do something, a calculation, a recommendation, and take an action. Somewhere along the line, there should be what I'll call an application architecture, which is an opinion about how a well-written application should be architected, whether it's mostly connected, mostly disconnected, the scenarios you describe. Somebody should have an opinion about what that looks like, and then there should be a platform that supports that.
Oh, well, you're in good company, because telcos love to comply by standards. This is, we all love to have these standards, which nobody adheres to. So that's going to be really difficult.
But even if it's not a general standard, even if you come to my network and I say, look, if you want to write a great industrial IoT sensor application, here is the architecture and this is how we support it in our platform. Because what I'm getting at is that I think that the telco providers are going to have to expand and have an opinion where they didn't necessarily have an opinion before, which is, what does it look like to be a good consumer of the services that I'm providing? And now you're leaking over away, you're starting to bleed into these other spaces. So back to your earlier point of where who are the players are going to be, somebody or several companies are going to start to stake a claim to that middle ground of this is how you do it, and here's the platform of how you do it. And then who the players are that fit underneath that are going to be interesting. But are those players going to become the dominant players? Are they going to be the ones who are going to prescribe the way these applications are going to be built, architected, and managed over time? So that's, I think, one of the great opportunities is there for somebody to do that. And it can either be you coming up or you're going down. It could be both. It could be somebody new, but a real opportunity to do that.
I mean, we're seeing a huge emergence in cloud, where we've got bare metal requirements. So we're moving a lot of our infrastructure over to bare metal so that we can embrace Kubernetes from the network infrastructure. And we're seeing even Amazon and Microsoft have a bare metal proposition. Do you think that those bare metal propositions are going to be converged with the tower companies so that you can have all this processing power at the telecom edge, not the device edge, sorry, Romil, at the telecom edge?
There's certainly a possible path on bare metal. There's a possible path where the dream of the network is just another utility, right? The light just works when I turn the switch on.
Careful,
may happen.
Careful.
I know. I don't buy it. It's not happening in my lifetime, but I'm just saying there's these people that dream of that. I don't know that that's where we're headed. The big shift in architecture is certainly one to edge compute, right? I mean, I think this world of there's only a few big cloud guys, and by golly, everything's going to go back there, and it's only going to get processed there because that's where the AI investments are, and that's where the engine and compute power is. That's going to change, right? And actually several of those guys are starting to make big investments, as you pointed out, Greg, right, in some of these edge compute, edge type platforms, that edge cloud, back to that edge cloud. And so I feel like the new architecture for tomorrow has at least three elements, right? If I was to gaze into my crystal ball, first, the sensor tech, right? No matter how simple to how complex the use case has gotten and will continue to drive to cheaper, more advanced, more accessible. I mean, there's, again, that 75 billion have to come with better price points that will enable better business cases. The second is, and I did say this briefly before, but it's maturity of AI, sure, but it's efficiency. The algorithms have to change or become massively more efficient because they have to run out there or closer to out there, not just in the big places they run today. And by the way, our networks now, back to your network point, have to be that low latency, high speed that can actually enable, right, the compute closer to the device or the edge. And it is a massive opportunity. And our role goes from being today the eSIM, global, independent, multi type, connectivity provider, to perhaps having multi-carrier. I have 44 backend integrations into major carriers on their behalf in partnership with them, deploying sort of what we call core anywhere, these gateways out at the edge to enable edge compute. So again, it's the people that start to think today and plan today for that architecture that will enable norms, applications in the future.
Another thing that we think is really going to play a critical role is the way in which we connect to this infrastructure. So you've got companies like PCCW Global that have a product, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, called Console Connect, which enables you to have one port of connection to your network infrastructure, but allows you on demand to connect to any cloud infrastructure that's got with dedicated guaranteed bandwidth. You're seeing companies like Equinix Fabric doing the same thing, and another company like Megaport. And this is effectively giving you the ability to connect your enterprise customers, but also giving you the ability to spin up on-demand infrastructure as you require it, with guaranteed connectivity. Not relying on connections over the internet or anything like that. Even when the application is not that mission critical.
I think let's just bring this back a little bit to the sort of AI discussion, because again, I'm going to the scenario, the use case, as Romil said, of the AI app. And we know that we're going to have little AI, let's call it that, running at the edge, which is a small little thing doing some detection, some pattern recognition, a thermostat recognizing that I come home at 5 o'clock and making the house warmer or colder. Very simple AI at the edge, AI in the network, and then AI in the cloud. Remember that with machine learning, you have to take massive amounts of data, incredible amounts of data to train a model.
Yep.
But once that model has been trained,
Yep.
you can now download that model to be executed at different places. So I'm a little skeptical of the of infinite availability. There's no such thing as 100% availability. And so as you design your AI distribution in the network, you sort of can't really separate the network from the actual application, the AI application that's executing. And so you have to have a notion of AI executing locally, maybe in a small device. Maybe it's a really big edge. That's okay. A car in an autonomous scenario, pretty powerful bunch of computers on wheels to be able to run at that edge. And it has to run in a mostly connected mode. And so AI is going to start to superimpose on top of this real demands for availability, bandwidth, latency, but also resiliency. And the resiliency is not only in the network, resiliency is in the overall application, which is my application either running at the core and the network at the edge has to be resilient for the business process that it's operating on. So something we defined many years ago, instead of saying that everything is real time, we said it has to be real enough time. And real enough time means that you can execute within the life cycle of the business process, running either at the edge, at the middle, or at the core, and build an architect around that. And then what are the demands that puts onto the network in terms of availability, provisioning, management, operationalization, error correction? Those are the sort of things that are going to come down rather than go up today. And so I think you're going to land up with this blur of the application and the network rather than this beautiful separation model which says, hi, I'm the network, you're the application, can we have a dance? I think it's going to be a little more romantic than that.
I wish we had more time. It's been such a great conversation. Maybe you can summarize where you want to place your bets.
I think I've sort of showed my cards already, to your point, right? I mean, our model has evolved from being the global independent connectivity provider over the last 3 years to really making that last mile work, data management, device management, bunch of managed services around device. this is only going to get more important in a world where there is more edge compute, more intelligence. And it actually doesn't matter to us whether it's deployed at the edge of the telco network, at a tower, at a packet gateway, or further out than that, or indeed at the edge device. I mean, at the end of the day, the autonomous car example that Norm just talked about, I mean, I think it's sort of one of these popular misconceptions that it needs this massive network speed or bandwidth because by golly, you've got to make really quick decisions on whether to stop when you see a stop sign. Let's face it, guys. There is no network in the world where you have the ability or can afford to go back to some central cloud to compute whether you're going to stop at that stop sign and come back. None. That decision has to be made out at the edge, right? The only thing that 5G will do for us or 6G will do for us one day is that the 3D maps and the other updates that have to be provided to allow that autonomous car to make decisions instantly out at the edge, those updates will go faster and it'll happen overnight or something and aren't, I mean, that's, so the intelligence is out at the edge and we're making a very big bet about enabling the application architecture, the use case architecture that can take advantage of that inexorable push. So that's our big bet for today.
It's a good bet.
I think I agree with those. I would say there's two interesting things that I sort of watch and look for. One is what is in the interconnectivity space is the movement from hardware to software. Best analogy I would say is if you look at any of the racks that are in one of the cloud data centers today, there is no router in the rack. There's just a switch, and the router logic actually runs inside each one of the compute modules. And I think this notion of dedicated black boxes of hardware are going to slowly dissolve into a higher speed interconnect where most of what was in hardware is now actually going to be running in software, which means that it has to be managed and updated and be secure and so on. And you're going to see that going from the rack, and I think you're going to see it go out all the way. It's going to start to bleed all the way through the edge. So I think there's this continual movement in sort of hardware to software, SDN, and so on. The other one, which you sort of heard from me as a pet topic, which is around resilient networks, which is that IoT and AI are going to start to put a different set of constraints on networks to sort of give you end-to-end capability. And the provider of a resilient network that is mostly connected, that has the application architecture, I think there's going to be a huge investment that's going to happen there.
Yeah, I agree. And we're investing so that for companies like Core and companies and mobile network operators that are utilizing our platform, that they can break out the data as close to the devices as possible. So if everybody can like and subscribe, we need to build up a viewership here. And give us the opportunity to bring more thought leadership conversations to you.